Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin know their path to the playoffs after Saturday's easy win is 2011 Alabama. Sort of. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's episode, we're breaking down the 27-3 rout of South Carolina, where Ole Miss figured out something critical. Despite the explosive offensive weapons that Lane Kiffin's arsenal possess, the path to success is through this dominant defense. The first half showed the flashy football that Ole Miss fans are accustomed to, but a failed fourth down conversion in minus territory led to the Gamecocks' only point. This set a light bulb off in Lane Kiffin's head. The second half was all about protecting that defense, not worrying as much about scoring, and the result felt much more like Alabama games from 2011 and 2012. It may have ended 27-3, but it felt like 50-3. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy offers other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. Congratulations to Locked On Vandy, by the way, in that win over Alabama. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Really interesting stuff. What we learned in this game against South Carolina is fairly simple. When this offense is varied, it'll be hard to outscore Ole Miss with the defense that they have. They don't need to focus on everything. They don't need to necessarily try to score 60 points a game and have 700 yards of offense. If they score 24, they're going to win more games than they're not. And I think Lane Kiffin noticed that. We're going to talk about that in just a second. The identity of this team is being established, and it is defensive. This is a defensive football team right now. And Tre Harris going down is a little bit concerning. If he misses any length of time, that could be problematic on the offensive side of the ball. But again, when the Ole Miss defense is the focal point of this team, it doesn't hurt quite as much. This is a game that Ole Miss won 27-3. You know, South Carolina had more first downs than Ole Miss at 19-17, but not first downs that really mattered. They ran for 151 yards to Ole Miss's 140. Ole Miss had a horrible game running the ball. South Carolina outran them. But they still only averaged about 3 yards per carry. Ole Miss threw for 285 yards in a down game for Jaxson Dart. South Carolina could not do that, 162. And Ole Miss total offense-wise won the battle 425-313. They had a turnover on the long ball that Juice Wells fumbled out of the back of the end zone. They also recovered a couple of turnovers from South Carolina as well. So that's the story from the ball game. But the main thing that happened was, like I said, that light bulb moment for Lane Kiffin. And Lane Kiffin was not on those Alabama teams from the 2011, 2010 timeframe when they were very defensive oriented. Everything was directed towards the defense. Honestly, it's the same way that Kirby Smart coaches his Georgia teams because of the way it was in those Alabama teams under Nick Saban in the early 2010s. See, this is what happened. Ole Miss came out at the beginning of the game and got a lead. Like it was quick, 14-0. They stopped a fake punt, went down and scored a touchdown. They scored again. It was 14-0, and the game was essentially over. Ole Miss could have played 8 quarters, and South Carolina was not going to score a touchdown in that game. They just weren't good enough to do it against Ole Miss's defense, which might be the best defense in the whole SEC this year, if we're going to be honest about it. They can cut down the penalties. They are dominant. Well, once we got into the second half and we started to see that, hey, something's not right with Jaxson Dart. He's not hitting passes that he normally puts on the money. He's overthrowing Juice Wells in the end zone by 17 yards, and it's just not working. How do we handle this? And the answer was, we don't press. We punt the ball and we play defense, and we get the ball back when South Carolina inevitably has to punt it back, and eventually you're going to break through. And it turned into one of those 27-3 games that felt like a 50-3 game. That's a game that if you looked at the scoreboard and Ole Miss had 56 points, and you would not be surprised because offensively, Ole Miss didn't play particularly well. And they would tell you they did not particularly play well. So Ole Miss won that game in about as dominating of a fashion as you can, and it was completely on the defense. Walter Nolan looked like the best player in the entire SEC. Sontaran Perkins is finally hitting that level that Ole Miss fans have been waiting on him to hit in this game. He had 12 tackles, I think, in this game. Let's see. You got the TJ Daugherty, who led the team in tackles with 13 tackles, 2 for loss, and a sack. And you had Sontaran Perkins, 12 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. He was a menace on the edge playing that jack position. He's somebody that if he can put on 15 pounds in the offseason, next year he has an All-American type year waiting in front of him. And the Roy locked on Ole Miss player of the game is Walter Nolan. He had 5 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks in this game. He was unblockable. It was basically being held on every single play. And we are going to put $100 in his Roy NIL account for being the Locked On Ole Miss player of the game. So congratulations to Walter Nolan for that. This defense was dominant. It didn't matter. There was literally one play that South Carolina run with any sense of effectiveness, and they got called for offensive pass interference like 3 times on that play. So it was obviously a pick play that was being run incorrectly, but they kept doing it over and over again because that tight end was probably the best player they had. Rocket Sanders and all that, they had to lean on the run because honestly, they could not throw the ball with any sense of confidence. And Ole Miss in the backfield, they cleaned up the penalties. Now, the offensive line was back to their old holding tricks from the year before, but they only gave up 1 sack. 3 holding penalties, 1 sack. But on the back end of the defense, they only got 1 penalty. They played pretty well. Tre Amos had a pick in that game to keep South Carolina out of the end zone. If you want to look at like red zone production for South Carolina in this game, it was not good. They were probably 0 for 4 touchdowns in the red zone and only 1 for 4 scoring because the game was just such out of reach and there was just a gulf of class between the 2 teams on the field. It's just the way it works from time to time. And Ole Miss was able to put that game away pretty simply, and they did it in a new way. This is a cool idea to think about. Lane Kiffin is slowly start to accidentally coming across the way of thinking that you don't have to win pretty every single game. It does not have to be gorgeous. You do not have to be the offensive mastermind scheming up offensive plays that take apart the defense. You can still try to do it. You can still work to do it, but it needs to be in the vein of protecting your defense, who is the strength of this team. If the other team does not score 10 points, you are not going to lose any football games this year. You're going to win the national championship if you hold the teams you're playing to 10 points or less. Period. That's just the way it's going to work. If Ole Miss holds every team remaining on their schedule to 10 points or less, they will win the national title. You have to coach the game with that in mind. There's no greater momentum swing in all of college football. It happens every single game than a failed 4th down conversion. When you try to go for it and you get stopped, the momentum completely changes and there's a swing. You saw this multiple times in the Ole Miss South Carolina game. When Shane Beamer tried his ridiculous fake punt at the beginning of the game, that took the wind out of that stadium, Ole Miss went down and scored a touchdown, and it was never any chance of a game again. The only time it got close to being a game again is when Ole Miss tried to go for it on 4th and 2 when there was no chance of South Carolina being able to drive the field. Just punt the ball away and watch them have to punt it right back to you. That is fine. But South Carolina got the stop on a 4th and short, went down and kicked a field goal and had the only points of the game. Now, the benefit of this is I think this was the light bulb moment for Lane Kiffin. I think this was the moment to where he saw exactly what was going on and how he needed to protect that defense. And then whenever Jaxson Dart got into a little bit of a funk in the second half, and he was just a little bit off, and you were without Tre Harris, and Juice Wells fumbled out of the back of the end zone, and offensively, it was a little bit problematic. You didn't even have to worry because you realized with that defense, if you protected them, South Carolina wasn't going to score a point. South Carolina wasn't good enough to score a point on you. And other teams on the schedule, they might be good enough to score a point, but if you can keep their scoring down and play to that defense and use the offensive weapons that you have to get above that 24-point threshold, you're going to win the rest of your games. That is just the way this works. This was the game against South Carolina where you didn't even have Princely and Monmielen. You had Suntaran Perkins, who's a really good player, but he's a backup in behind somebody that is a borderline first-round pick. The defense is the important thing with this team, and Lane Kiffin, I think, noticed that. And because of that, honestly, if we're going to be real, that's the reason that Henry Parrish and Matt Jones got all the carries, because you wanted the people that had the carries during the week to handle the carries on the afternoon. You wanted nothing new to happen. And you wanted this to go as predictably as possible, even if you had to punt, because you couldn't handle a turnover. You couldn't handle anything out of the ordinary. It was about protecting your defense. And this game, that might have been Henry Parrish and Matt Jones. In the LSU game, I do think that during the week, Ulysses Bentley and Rashad Amos need carries because of this murder ball path that Ole Miss is on, to where this defense is going to become a major component of this team. Those two, and eventually Logan Diggs, who won't be back until at least the Arkansas game, I think, are going to be major components of this team moving forward. And obviously you have the Tre Harris and the Juice Wells and all those guys, and the tight ends need to be more involved. But everything needs to be done with the reasoning of we're going to protect our defense. We're going to make sure that these guys can keep your guys out of the end zone and off the scoreboard, because at the end of the day, the team that has the most points on the scoreboard wins the game. And right now, the path of getting the most wins in that way is by the defense keeping your team from being able to get into the end zone as well. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Jaxson Dart is as much of a funk as we've ever seen at Ole Miss, and that's saying something, considering he's not even really playing badly right now. What's going on with the Rebels quarterback? Stay tuned for a breakdown. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find the best professionals for the role, right? That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They've got the best tools to find you the right candidates for your team faster and for free. From my own experience, when I was hiring for my team, I knew it was important to have the right quality candidates lined up. With LinkedIn Jobs, I was able to find top-notch professionals quickly, which saved me so much time. Their platform made it easy to sift through and find the perfect fit. What sets LinkedIn Jobs apart, it's not just the job board. LinkedIn connects you with professionals you can't find anywhere else. Many of them might actually not be actively job hunting, but they're open to the right opportunity if it comes along. In fact, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other job sites. So if you're not searching LinkedIn, you're kind of missing out. Plus, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. So ready to make the right hire? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hire a professional like a professional with LinkedIn Jobs. We want to welcome a new partner to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast in College Corner. It's your one-stop shop for all things Ole Miss. Game day is just around the corner, and this week the fans are rocking red against LSU. So head on over to College Corner to pick up your perfect game day gear. It doesn't matter if it's Oxford, Flowood, or Ridgeland, they can hook you up. And Scott just got a bunch of the new Realtree Galaxy tumblers, and they have a ton more stuff on that Galaxy Realtree setup on the way. Whether you're gearing up for football, basketball, or baseball, College Corner has got you covered. They're located off of Sisk Avenue, right across from the new Chick-fil-A. Getting to the store is a breeze, and they have plenty of parking. And for those of you out of state, no worries. Just go to collegecornerstore.com, where they turn around orders lightning fast. Trust me, this isn't just a pitch. College Corner is where I get all of my Rebel gear. So visit collegecornerstore.com or stop by the College Corner in Flowood, Ridgeland, or Oxford today. So it's really interesting what's going on with Jaxson Dart. And we had a couple of shows last week where we talked about Jaxson Dart generally in his Ole Miss career doesn't have a bad to mid game in back-to-back games. He usually bounces back really quick. And in this game, that wasn't necessarily the case. I don't know what's going on, but there's passes that he normally hits that he did not hit in this game. I don't know if he didn't feel right. I don't know if he has a little bit of an injury. I don't know what's going on because we're midway through the season. Everybody has bumps and bruises. But I do think that he isn't exactly what he was in week 3. And that's irregardless to the competition, because whenever you look at him, it just didn't look right against South Carolina. Against the Gamecocks, he was 14 of 27. That's nearly 50%. 285 yards. That completions percentage is far below what it has been against the other games this season. Like I said, he might not be right, but there were a lot of open passes that he normally hits that he did not hit in this game. If you just look at the passes that he missed, he was probably looking at somewhere near 400 yards passing over the course of the game. This could have very easily been a 20 for 27 for 400 yard game. But he didn't quite hit those passes. Now, this is not anything critical of Jaxson. This is just wondering when he is going to snap out of it and become the Jaxson Dart we're all accustomed to. Now, if you look at this regular season, he is third on the Ole Miss all-time passing yardage leader with like 8,300 and something yards, and a little bit under 2,000 yards away from Eli Manning. He's on pace to shatter that record. He's on pace to shatter the single season yardage record. His touchdowns aren't quite there. He only has 13 touchdowns. He's on pace for 26, but Ole Miss is 5-1 at the moment. 280 yards a game, averaging passing the football, is good enough to get him the Eli Manning career passing yardage record in the regular season. If you're going to count postseason, he only needs 240 passing yards per game, which is beyond doable, and it's almost a foregone conclusion, barring injury or something like that he's going to hit that number. But I just wanted to point that out as well. Juice Wells, 3 catches, 97 yards. The weird fumble, he played pretty well. He dropped the ball in the end zone that he normally gets. He was close to having like a 5 catches for 140 yards, 2 touchdown type day. He was that close, and that would have kind of broken the hearts of South Carolina fans if we're going to be real. And Jordan Watkins appeared really for the first time this season in 5 catches, 72 yards, looked like his old self. I think we're going to see him become more of an option in the slot as this moves forward. And if Tre Harris is down for any significant period of time, I think the 3 wide receivers that you're going to see against LSU is Jordan Watkins, Caden Lee, and Juice Wells. Either way, LSU's defense has struggled this whole season. Ole Miss should be able to run the ball, pass the ball, and do whatever they need to do. LSU is at the point with this new defensive coordinator that they have that they blitz to mask some of the deficiencies they have on the back end. If you do not have enough time to get the pass off, that's going to protect like PJ Woodland, the true freshman defensive back from Oak Grove, is like starting at LSU right now. A good player, but this is a team that you would assume that Jaxson Dart has a chance to get right against, because this is a team in the past that he has gotten right against. So we'll see exactly what happens with Jaxson Dart. Remember, we talked in the first segment about how the identity of this team is the defense, and the whole goal of this team needs to be protecting that defense, which means you might not see as many shot plays moving forward offensively. You may see a Ole Miss working to try to run the ball more effectively with bigger type running backs to keep the chains moving. You might see a situation like the second half. Ole Miss was snapping the ball slowly in that second half. That was my indicator that things had changed a little bit. They were running clock as much as they could, or as much as they felt comfortable doing, because they knew if they shorten the game and don't do anything stupid, South Carolina was not going to score and was not going to beat them. The game was over essentially at about the 7-minute mark of the first quarter, because South Carolina just didn't have the horses to score. And I think this was the light bulb moment for Lane Kiffin. And I think the offense is going to be built moving forward to maximize that, because it's going to be about protecting the defense. Everybody that loves analytics, I do not think he is going to go for it anymore. By the way, props to Frazier Messine, who is absolutely killing the ball this season. He's averaging about 45 yards per punt. So what we really learned this weekend, I think we learned a couple of things. I think Ole Miss is absolutely amongst the elite in the Southeastern Conference, like 1, 2, or 3 in the Southeastern Conference. Now, what that means and how good they are on the national scale, I do not know. But I would put Ole Miss on a field against Texas. I would put them on Georgia, against Georgia, Alabama, Missouri, all of them. I would take Ole Miss in that situation. Every team in the SEC is struggling with other teams in the SEC. So is this the year that the SEC is actually what we've always claimed it was, to where every game is losable? I don't know. Is Jaxson Dart capable of coming out of his little slump? And when that happens, will Ole Miss continue to protect that defense, or will they get back to their old ways? Because the way this works is the offense is really, really good, and they just pressure that all the way into the end, and that gets you in trouble at some point during the season. That's the way it's happened in their last 3 losses, to where it's just, hey, they figured out how to deal with this offense, and they figured out how to slow it down, and you didn't necessarily have a plan B. The plan B right now is going to be that offense. I think plan A is going to be that defense. So we'll see how it goes. It should be really interesting. Like I said, I'm not being critical of Jaxson Dart because he hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been what we expect him to be. So we'll see how that goes. Week 7 SEC lines are out, and we got our eyes on some big matchups. The game of the week, Ole Miss and LSU, but this week is stacked with action. Stay tuned to see where the smart money is headed. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. You know, they have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, there's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but Game Time allows you to see exactly what the view is from every seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium before you buy the ticket. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might even be able to help you out with tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So really interesting stuff this weekend. This is the week 7 betting lines, and if you want to look at what's going on, there's 7 games within the conference this week, starting with South Carolina at Alabama. Alabama is a 20.5-point favorite in Bryant-Denny. I think they're kind of viewing that as a T's and P's type game, but South Carolina also has to get right as well, and Alabama has shown the propensity to not be able to score and to go through droughts. And Alabama's big strength is getting explosive plays. That's what they do with Ryan Williams. That's what they do with their team. South Carolina's biggest strength defensively is also not giving up explosive plays. So you might see a situation where Alabama's running the football. This could be a relatively low-scoring game. I do not know if South Carolina is going to be able to score the ball a lot, although they did put 33 points on the board against LSU. I don't know if Alabama can beat them by 20.5 points without explosive plays. So if they can't get the explosive plays, how are they going to cover this spread? Especially after we just saw, congratulations to Vandy, what Vandy did to Alabama this weekend. Also, hilarious that happened to Kalen DeBoer, a.k.a. Ray Perkins. Missouri's a 27.5-point favorite over UMass. UMass is one of the worst teams in college football. Missouri got absolutely boat raced at Texas A&M. This is a bounce back game on the road at UMass. I still think Missouri covers, but man, that's a weird game all the way around. Texas in the Red River Shootout up favored by 14.5 points to Oklahoma. This is a game that line is almost too big. I just feel like Oklahoma is going to be able to score enough to cover in this game. Now, Quinn Ewers is back. Necessarily Texas is back. We'll see exactly how that goes, but that might be too many points for this rivalry. And that's kind of going to be my theme in all these games. Mississippi State's at Georgia. Georgia's favored by 34.5 points. 5 touchdowns they are favored by. That might be too many points in this game. We haven't seen this Georgia team be capable of scoring that much, except against an Alabama defense in the second half that gave up 40 points to Vanderbilt. Think about that for a second. Florida is at Tennessee. Tennessee's favored by 15.5 points after dropping the game at Arkansas. This is another situation. Florida played relatively well defensively, and against a system that running the ball is going to be really similar to what Josh Heupel does, if they can stop that run and force Nico Iamaleava to beat them, they might be in pretty good shape to cover that line. I do not know if Florida has the ability to win outright in that game. They probably don't, being in Knoxville, but I do think there's a chance they could keep it close. Florida's actually playing pretty decently right now, and everybody's talking about all the smoke happening behind the scenes. Billy Napier's in danger of going on a run and on a winning streak, and if that happens, just kind of like reset everything. Ole Miss is a 2.5-point favorite at LSU. We'll talk about that in just a second. And finally, Vanderbilt is at Kentucky. Kentucky's favored by 11.5 points, and this is after Vanderbilt win. And, of course, I'm more likely than anybody else to take Kentucky because I know that Vanderbilt partied after beating Alabama. But Ole Miss is favored by 2.5 points over LSU at the moment. The over-under is at 63.5 points. Points are going to be scored in this game. Ole Miss's defense is better than LSU's defense. The offenses are pretty similar. And when that happens, Ole Miss is probably the better team. Special teams-wise, I like the Rebels. The intangibles being in Tiger Stadium. Ole Miss hasn't won in Tiger Stadium since 2008. That's advantage LSU. So I think at the end of the day, this line is pretty close to right. But if Ole Miss can take the crowd out of it, if Ole Miss can kind of assert themselves and play a very clean game, no sacks, no turnovers, no big momentum swinging plays like we like to talk about. If that happens, Ole Miss has a better team. They're going to get more stops with their defense than LSU is going to get with their defense. And Ole Miss has learned how to deal with these LSU defenses and how they set things up. Ole Miss was very varied against South Carolina. The offense essentially became extremely tough to stop when so many weapons are available down the field. It's whenever they lock on that it gets problematic. And we've seen that about 2-3 times a year. We'll see. Tiger Stadium can be a unbelievably tough place to play. It should be really good. LSU's a top 10 level team. This is going to be a fantastic game on ABC Saturday night. And of course, I have a major hurricane coming through on Wednesday. So I don't even know if I'm going to have power for that game. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I'm not going to miss the game because if I have to do something, I will see it. But we'll see. Just so everybody knows, major hurricane in the area, supposed to get here on Wednesday. I'm recording all my Blue Label shows, the main shows that release at 6 o'clock Central every day. We're going to try and get all 5 of those done by Tuesday night. My crossover with Matt Moscana is Tuesday night. And then on the extra stuff, we're going to try and do as long as we have power. So bear with me if something gets missed, but we're at least going to try and get all of those main shows available to Ole Miss fans. So I hope you enjoy that as well. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And now go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find a link to Locked On College Football in the description. You don't even need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It is our texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is also down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we're going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.